This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South African hospitals say COVID-19 seems to have plateaued, but they are not letting their guard down just yet. A no-deal Brexit looming as Boris Johnson says the UK could walk away from trade talks. And marking World Food Day when many cannot put food on the table. What's the situation in Africa? Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague, Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche?
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz today. The International Monetary Fund warns of long-lasting scars on the global economy from the coronavirus pandemic. And Egypt's economy records an upturn in September as consumer demand rises and business activity resumes. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in South Africa, where the country is no longer among the top 10 countries worst affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The infection rate in South Africa has largely plateaued, and health facilities are reporting they have enough capacity to handle the seriously ill. In the Western Cape, most temporary hospitals have closed, but authorities there are keen to not let their guard down. CGTN's Travers Andrews reports.
It's been a long and challenging campaign to contain the spread of COVID-19 in South Africa, but the tide is turning, and the country has passed its initial surge in cases. Health officials credit the inroads made in combating the disease to a cohesive health strategy.
One of the things that we've had, I must say, decisive leadership around COVID-19 in the country, and particularly if I look at the Western Cape as an example of that decisive leadership. Decisive and agile, I must add. So from the beginning of this pandemic, we followed a data-led and evidence-informed strategy. So we looked at the data, we listened to what the scientists were telling us about COVID, we looked at international examples around the world, and we brought those lessons into the province.
The Western Cape was once the epicenter of COVID-19 in the country, with more than 5,000 healthcare workers contracting the virus, 38 of which died from the disease. Now the testing strategy has greatly improved, and health officials say they're already planning for a potential second wave, as is being seen in Europe.
So what we're doing in the province, we really have an excellent data center, and we have 4 key indicators that we measure on a daily basis, and that helps us to determine whether there's a resurgence or possible second wave. We have found, while the numbers in the province are generally going down, all our indicators are going down, the cases are going down, hospitalizations going down, even the death rates going down. We have found areas in recent weeks where the caseload has started increasing again.
And that increase has been attributed to the behavior of people that has resulted in super spreading events. But it's something city officials are closely monitoring, especially as they move to open up the economy even further.
We had to put in a lot of measures to make sure that we bring down the infection rate and that locals and visitors also strictly adhere to those health protocols. And then the business establishments, by implementing all the different health measures that are now mandatory. So it's a whole of city approach.
While South Africa's COVID-19 infection rate may have stabilized, in the Western Cape there remains some concern about pockets of new infections, including a recent super spreader event that emanated from a local bar and led to 89 people being infected. Now, health officials here say this is something they're keen to avoid, especially as the summer season approaches, the economy begins to open up, and more people begin to socialize. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Schools across Uganda are welcoming back students for the first time since March. The government's decision comes as the country continues work to contain the coronavirus outbreak. The school reopening comes with stringent measures. Leon Sinyange reports.
Returning to school for the first time in 7 months, Rania Nanono, like millions of other students across the country, had her studies put on pause in March because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Because our year was going to be cancelled, but the president said that we are coming back on school on 15th.
The Ministry of Education has set up stringent guidelines for the reopening of schools. Only students in their final year are allowed to start.
As a school, we prepared our foot operated hand washing facilities. We have our nurse, we are social distancing, so we feel that we are very ready.
Teachers are also required to wear face shields during and even out of class sessions. Hand sanitizers are a must-have for every student. The pupils say sitting a meter apart feels unusual, but that is now required under the guidelines. Authorities hope that schools can adhere to the rules throughout the term. With all kinds of safety measures in place, students adapting could take some time. The authorities at this school say they won't be throwing caution to the wind.
We have sensitized them that the disease is there and it is for real. And therefore we have to protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect other families.
The opening of the schools has also eased the anxiety for some parents worried about their children's education. But health concerns remain.
I am still worried about schools reopening, but I know God will protect us.
I think everybody now knows what to do. We can try and avoid the spread of the disease. If schools can do what is required, there won't be any problem for the children.
Uganda currently has recorded over 10,000 COVID-19 cases and 96 deaths. The Ministry of Education says schools will resume to full capacity when it deems it safe, while some schools continue to take on online classes. For those reporting back, there will be a lot of classwork to catch up on. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
In Europe, many of the major capitals are reimposing various restrictions on people's movements as the continent struggles to deal with a second wave of the pandemic. In France, Paris is now under a nighttime curfew after the country saw record rises in newly daily infections. But we begin in Spain, where hospitality workers in Barcelona have clashed with police after bars and restaurants were ordered closed in an effort to curb the spread of the virus. CGTN's Rahul Patak reports.
Anger and frustration on the streets of Barcelona on Friday. Thousands of workers from Catalonia's hospitality industry making themselves heard. They were protesting at the regional government's decision to close all bars and restaurants in the region for 2 weeks, the order coming into force at midnight on Thursday. The Catalan Premier insists the recent surge in COVID-19 cases has been so alarming, he had to bring in tough measures now so as to avoid going back into a full lockdown later. Now, the issue that bar and restaurant owners in Barcelona have is that currently the infection rate in Catalonia is 263 cases per 100,000 people. That's exactly the Spain national average. Compare that to Madrid, where the rate is nearly double that, and yet the bars and restaurants remain open. Elsewhere, France has reimposed its state of health emergency following a record rise on Thursday of over 30,000 new daily infections in the country. President Macron said that the new measures for Paris and 8 other major cities include a curfew where residents will be confined to their homes from 9 p.m. until 6 a.m. Private gatherings are now restricted to no more than 6 people. All the new measures are expected to remain in place for at least 4 weeks. In the southern Italian region of Campania, schools have decided to close their doors to help slow the spread of the coronavirus. Local authorities, such as the one that governs Naples, Italy's third largest city, have opted to keep children away from school whilst continuing classes online. It's not a decision welcomed by the central government.
The contagion curve at school is very, very low. This means that we have been working efficiently to achieve a high level of safety for our children. This is also down to the schools themselves and the people who work in those schools and the students. So to close the schools altogether in this way is not the best solution.
Italy recorded its highest daily infection rate on Thursday with close to 9,000 new cases.
Europe set a record this week for new infections, surpassing the United States in cases per capita. That makes the continent once again the epicenter of the crisis. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
Britain's Prime Minister says unless the EU fundamentally changes its position in negotiations with the UK, there will be no post-Brexit trade deal. Boris Johnson stopped short of pulling out of the free trade talks, but accused the bloc of not wanting to negotiate seriously. It comes as European Union leaders discuss foreign policy on the second day of their summit in Brussels. A short while ago, we spoke to our reporters Tony Waterman in Brussels and Lolo Abdafid in London about the Brexit developments. Let's listen in.
Well, there's still 10 weeks of this transition period until the 1st of January when, of course, there will be a different trade route between the UK and the EU. So there's still time, but what Boris Johnson is doing with this announcement is basically lobbing the ball back into the EU's court and looking for further compromises on those difficult areas of negotiations which haven't gone well, especially in the last 6 weeks, on access to fishing rights and also the concern by the European Union countries that there could be an unfair advantage with state aid given to companies in Britain as opposed to countries very, very close by on the European mainland. Those are the main sticking points, and the governance also of a future trade deal. So by saying that, well, okay, if there's nothing concluded, we will go and do what Australia is doing with many countries worldwide and follow the World Trade Organization rules on trade and tariffs, which of course does mean more checks and more tariffs on all the goods flowing either way. Now that means that on 51% of Britain's imports from the European Union, there will be checks, there will be tariffs, and there will be extra costs for businesses. So there was a message there by Boris Johnson to those businesses in the UK, you must now prepare for this from the 1st of January because this now will happen and likely to happen, as he puts it. Equally, on the 41% of exports from Britain to the European mainland.
To judge by the latest EU summit in Brussels, that won't work for our EU partners. They want the continued ability to control our legislative freedom, our fisheries, in a way that is completely unacceptable to an independent country. And since we have only 10 weeks until the end of the transition period on January the 1st, I have to make a judgment about the likely outcome and to get us all ready.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel extended more of an olive branch. She encouraged Johnson to stay around the negotiating table and also said that it's going to take concessions on both sides. And certainly it is going to mean that both of them are going to have to step back from these red lines at least a little bit when it comes to fisheries governance and the level playing field if they expect to get this deal over the line by the end of the year. But even as you had these threats of a no-deal Brexit coming through and being thrown across the channel, plans were being made for the negotiating team here, the EU negotiating team, to be sent over to London next week. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tweeted that the team is ready to go and will be there next week. They want another 2 weeks of talks, so there is still hope that at the final hour some deal can be struck.
And we're not done just yet. More news after the break. Here's what's ahead. Marking World Food Day, when many cannot put food on the table, what's the situation in Africa? And adventure cut short, we tell you about a Kenyan couple stuck in South America for 4 months due to COVID-19 lockdowns.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try
had not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Ken Saro-Wiwa, writer and activist in Nigeria, executed in 1995 after standing up against oil companies, pushing for equal rights for the people in the Niger Delta. Now, Ken Saro-Wiwa's family and the Ogoni speak out.
It's amazing how he's put Ogoni land on the map.
He made the invisible visible.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. In 2018, a Kenyan couple packed up their lives and set out for an adventure around the world on their motorbikes. But when the coronavirus pandemic struck earlier this year, they got stuck in South America for 4 months. Tuli Shabalala has the story of their halted travels. Let's take a look.
This is Dos and Wamuyu Kariuki, a Kenyan couple who love adventure. 2 months after they got married in 2018, they quit their jobs and set off to motorbike around the world. Their adventure was planned to take 3.5 years.
We left 2 months after we got married.
Yeah.
Legally got married. And for me, this has been the best honeymoon. I think he's more than a husband, he's my true friend. Yeah. That's the biggest out of it. Of course, in addition to seeing places and building memories together, memories that not everybody has an opportunity to create the way we've done it, it's very, very unique, and that's my highlight.
This year, they were heading into North America via Panama, but the coronavirus pandemic came while they were in Nicaragua.
Good morning, guys. Today is what day?
The two were stuck in the capital Managua for 4.5 months before flying back to Nairobi in August after international travel resumed.
It feels good, especially after COVID happened and getting stuck outside the country. We looked forward to being home. And there are things that we have really missed over the 2 years of travel. We missed the food, we missed our family and friends, so it's really nice to have them back.
As countries around the world closed their borders, the Kariukis' travel plans ground to a halt. They shipped their German-made bikes home, having visited only Africa, South America and Antarctica. Their way of life has fundamentally been altered.
Coming back, I think the whole sense of minimalist living, I really liked, because on your motorcycle you can't carry any luxury items, and we went by for 2 years without any luxury items. So I think the minimalist living is who we are now.
When the world opens up again, they hope to resume their trip and inspire others on the continent to travel. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And Friday marked World Food Day. This year, the issue of food security is even bigger and more critical. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the hunger situation for millions around the world. In South Africa, the pandemic has also taken its toll on employment and, in turn, the state of food accessibility. CGTN's Yulisa and Jamela visited a community that is working to overcome this kind of hunger and poverty.
World Food Day calls for global solidarity to help all populations. Here in South Africa, the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Thoko Didiza, commemorated the day by visiting rural communities that have been specifically hit hard as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's also communities who were able to make means and survive as a result of agricultural projects that they embarked on. Projects that were mostly led by rural women.
We know the conditions around which rural women in particular operate, where there are challenges of scarcity of land, where there are challenges of water, but also challenges of infrastructure that enables them to be able to farm, at the scale at which they would want to. We are also aware of the disruptions that COVID has caused and its impact, particularly on rural women.
And as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage many societies, these women were able to survive as a direct result of their small-holding farming.
I was unemployed and was a single mother. I had nothing at all. Then I started here, and now I'm living better, as well as my family. We sell the vegetables, and this brings some money. Not much, but the little we get, we use to help our families.
Minister Didiza told the community of Bronkhorstspruit, just outside capital Pretoria, that their role is key, as small-holding farming is crucial to food security.
In the way in which it has performed, because as you know, that one of the interventions that government made, even during the stringent lockdown, when we were containing the spread of the virus, agriculture was allowed to operate to ensure that there can be food availability for our society, even during these challenging times.
According to the United Nations, smallholder farming is crucial for producing food and sustaining millions of livelihoods in developing countries. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Bronkhorstspruit, South Africa.
Well, China says it's doing what it can to curb food waste and meet one of the goals of the UN 2030 agenda, which is zero hunger. As CGTN's Richard Nta reports, the number of meals thrown away every year in China could feed entire countries.
Food waste is a massive issue in China, but while there's no national report reflecting this problem across the country, a 2015 study offered an apt overview of the situation. Data from Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, and Lhasa showed these cities wasted up to 18 million tons of food that year. That's enough to feed up to 50 million people, equal to populations of Australia and New Zealand combined for a whole year. The top 3 causes of food waste were tourist groups, primary and secondary school students, and official banquets. The Chinese government is not having it anymore. This year it launched the so-called Clean Plate campaign. The directive is simple. It's encouraging residents to eat everything on their plates to reduce food waste. Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed that people should maintain a sense of crisis about food security. Relevant sectors heeded this call. Restaurants, trade associations, and local governments have come up with measures to support the cause. The Wuhan Catering Industry Association, for one, called on restaurants to implement the N1 ordering model. This means a group must order one dish less than the number of diners. Across the country, some restaurants are now offering half-size and smaller portions, and offering diners takeout containers for their leftovers. Richard Nta, CGTN.
Uganda is turning its capital city Kampala into a tourism attraction center in an attempt to boost domestic visitor numbers. Local authorities have erected sculptures that represent the country's wildlife, hoping it will encourage people to leave the city to see more on what's on offer. CGTN's Hilary Ayasega reports.
This sculpture has become a major attraction in the capital Kampala. It is strategically placed on Kira Road, one of Kampala's busiest streets.
When I walk along these streets, I get to see the art pieces
that actually mean a lot to me because I get to know the big five, I get to know the endangered species in the world.
And more sculptures of birds and animals are standing tall on the street. This art piece depicts one of the rare bird species in the world, the shoebill. Conservationists here believe such displays will help promote domestic tourism. Uganda is rich in flora and fauna, but few locals visit the national parks to view it.
All these national parks are the borders. So there are very many Ugandans who have never even seen these animals. So when they see this, they say, oh, you mean I can see this live in a national park? Then this can entice that very person and say, okay, let me go and see this very animal.
Uganda receives about 1.8 million tourists annually at its tourism parks and sites. Less than a third of those are usually local tourists. The new initiative has started yielding positive results.
Crested crane, it has all these colors. So why not see the live one, like the real one that is moving somewhere in the park, in the green pasture or something? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Tourism is Uganda's top foreign exchange earner. Last year, the country earned $1.6 billion in revenue. But the industry has been hit hard by the outbreak of COVID-19, something which affects people's expenditure on leisure. Hopefully, as the government rolls out this initiative and also offers incentives to the locals, it could boost domestic tourism. Hilary Isiga, CGTN, Kampala.
A taxi hailing service operated by women in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo has caught the attention of many locals accustomed to seeing men in the driver's seat of taxis. The company has employed women drivers in a bid to empower them economically and get passengers safely to their destinations. CGTN's Chris Ocharinga has more on this report.
This pink and grey taxi stands out from the yellow taxis that are common in Kinshasa. And it's not just the color that sets it apart. UBIS cabs, which stands for Universal Bisolé cabs, are driven by women. Zawadi Mitima is a university graduate who's been driving them for a year now.
Many of us women are responsible drivers. I plan my journey and ensure that my client travels safely. I don't ever rush to get our clients to their destination. I believe female drivers are more calm on the road.
The company prides itself on reliable and safe travels around the city. These taxis have tracking devices that ensure that the women behind the wheels get their passengers safely to their destination. That's a big issue in Kinshasa because of an increase in kidnappings by people posing as taxi drivers. UBIS Cabs was launched 2 years ago by Congolese entrepreneur Patricia Nzolantima. She got the company name from her nickname Bizoli.
I decided to employ female drivers because I believe it will go a long way in empowering women financially. Many women here are marginalized. I started working on this project 5 years ago, and I'm glad it has come to fruition.
Patricia studied business management at Harvard and Stanford in the US. She even met former US President Bill Clinton.
One of the very important things that has made me succeed in this business is my faith in God. Without it, I wouldn't have stayed focused on my vision. I have overcome many challenges because of my faith.
Her business has grown significantly over the past 2 years. She's now set up an academy to train more drivers. The company has also ventured into motorcycle delivery services.
The emancipation of women is about us being given opportunities to do jobs that men have traditionally been doing. Many people get shocked when they see us riding these motorcycles. My life has really changed now.
But it will take longer to change the attitudes of some Congolese men who believe a woman's place is in the kitchen.
I was very shocked to see women driving taxis in this city. I kept asking myself what was going on. It's something very extraordinary.
As for these women, getting to this point is a good start. It's breaking gender stereotypes and already made a difference in their lives. Chris Ocharinga, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business segment with Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The International Monetary Fund warns of long-lasting scars on the global economy from the coronavirus pandemic. And Egypt's economy records an upturn in September as consumer demand rises and business activity resumes.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Now, the International Monetary Fund says the coronavirus pandemic could leave long-lasting scars on the global economy. A key committee that advises the organization's board met on Thursday as part of this year's virtual IMF World Bank annual meetings. Giles Gibson reports from Washington.
The IMF's International Monetary and Financial Committee says it will use all the tools at its disposal to restore jobs, confidence and growth around the world. It also said making COVID-19 vaccines and treatments available to all countries is the key to overcoming the pandemic and, by extension, helping economies to recover. The IMF published its latest World Economic Outlook earlier this week, forecasting the global economy will contract by 4.4% in 2020. It was a slightly improved forecast compared to its last one in June, but the IMF's managing director called on governments not to lose their nerve as the crisis drags on.
Stepping up vital health measures is an imperative, as is well-targeted fiscal and monetary support to households and to firms. So the IMF message from these meetings is very clear. Avoid premature withdrawal of support. Pulling the plug too soon risks serious self-inflicted harm.
The IMF says China will be the only major economy in the world to achieve growth this year. Its economists also found that advanced economies are coping with the global recession triggered by COVID-19 better than developing ones. There's some relief for those countries in the short term, with the G20 nations this week extending debt relief on $14 billion of payments for another 6 months. But the IMF says the coronavirus pandemic could still lead to higher levels of poverty and inequality across the world. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
And heading to Egypt now, the country's non-oil private sector expanded for the first time in 14 months in September on the back of a rise in consumer demand and strengthened business activity. Now, this shows the first month of economic expansion since July 2019 and potentially signals a modest turnaround after the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. While CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more details.
Many countries across the globe have witnessed the pandemic-related economic fallout during the year, including Egypt. The North African state has, however, experienced a quick turnaround in the non-petroleum sector that has recorded modest growth in 3 consecutive months.
More than $12.7 billion has been pumped into the market to support it against the effects of the coronavirus, especially the huge drop in supply and demand. The expansion is driven by local production and exports. Exports this year are the second highest in the last 20 years for Egypt, while growth in businesses has been the highest in 5 years.
Agricultural products are Egypt's leading exports over the last few years, recording an increase of 4.5 million tons in 2020. This has helped raise the gauge above the 50 mark that separates expansion from contraction. Multiple mega infrastructure projects funded by the government and constructed by local companies have given a major boost to the private sector. Real estate and industrial sectors have also received a lot of support from the government. This has created employment opportunities, more production, and more demand from local consumers, which translates into higher revenue for the private sector. While there is optimism for a strong economic outlook, there are still challenges that needs to be addressed.
The confidence in the strength of Egypt's economy to withstand the global crisis is owed to reforms launched in 2016 and which have earned the trust of international investors amid the coronavirus pandemic. The monetary policy has succeeded in encouraging investors to look at Egypt, but what we need is to provide more facilities and less complicated procedures for new companies and industries to set up. It's a major hindrance for the private sector.
Although the numbers are positive, experts say there's still a lot of work to be done to achieve the targets set by the government in improving the economic outlook. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Sudan's government has signed a memorandum of understanding with General Electric to increase power generation by up to 470 megawatts. Now, in a statement, GE says it plans to deliver electricity to about 600,000 households through mobile turbines that can be installed within months. It will also rehabilitate 3 existing power plants. Now, the company says it is also exploring cooperation on further power projects as well as health projects. Sudan's cabinet said on Wednesday that it was planning to boost output at a power plant in El Fula in West Kordofan at a total cost of $915 million.
For 30 years, Sudan has remained stunted, not dealing with large companies like General Electric. Today, the Memorandum of Understanding will open the door to various sectors. GE operates in various sectors, including electricity, of course, energy in general, as well as healthcare. Today's Memorandum of Understanding concerns 2 sectors, energy and healthcare. The memorandum opens the door for the first project that provides 470 megawatts, which will provide electricity to 600,000 homes.
This memorandum is a step towards a long relationship with the Sudanese government to provide the necessary energy and to improve the network for energy transportation, as well as the development and improvement of the healthcare system's infrastructure. These include X-ray machines or machines for the heart and tumors, as well as first aid units, especially those in rural areas and villages.
And Nigeria is spending big to improve its rail infrastructure. The government has approved the reconstruction of a railway network that will link the country's southern city of Port Harcourt to the northeastern city of Maiduguri. The cost of the project is put at a little over $3 billion. President Muhammadu Buhari has made the improvement of the country's rail infrastructure a priority for his government. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
The approval of the new rail contract comes just weeks after the government approved another rail construction linking Nigeria's northwestern city of Kano and Maradi, the second largest city in next-door neighbor Niger Republic. The government is also currently constructing yet another rail line from the country's commercial city of Lagos to the western city of Ibadan. That project is scheduled for completion before the end of the year.
If there is any infrastructure that we badly need in this economy, it's rail infrastructure. Because the level of domestic connectivity within our economy is very weak. This economy is a very big economy. And the more integrated the economy is, the faster will the economy grow. And the more inclusive the economy will be. And if we're able to build an inclusive economy through this faster integration, the impact on poverty, the impact on jobs will be very, very tremendous.
The Port Harcourt-Maiduguri rail line will effectively connect the country's oil-rich Niger Delta region and the northeast, making it easier to move persons and cargoes between both parts of the country and reduce the pressure on roads as well as cut journey time.
The Port Harcourt-Maiduguri, there are new branch lines, and I want to call the branch lines new. From Port Harcourt to Bonny, it's a new line. From Port Harcourt to Owerri is also a new line. There's another new line, there's a line connecting the narrow gauge to the standard gauge at Kafanchan. Then there is a branch line before Maiduguri to Damaturu and Gashua. That's what has been approved.
The government says the rail route is capable of transporting 11 million tons of cargo, and economists believe this is one rail project long overdue.
The more of these projects that we have, I think the better for the economy, because it will ease the challenge of logistics, and the challenge of logistics is one of the biggest impediments or constraints to productivity in the economy. It's one of the biggest factors in the cost of production, the cost of distribution, and even the inflationary challenges that we have in the economy. So I think it's a welcome development.
If everything goes as planned, rail work on the rail line is expected to commence by December. And the government says the project will be a joint funding with private partners.
That's a fantastic idea. And that is what we have also canvassed for over the years in the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, because we believe that the government doesn't have all the finances, all the funding to be able to fix the infrastructure. So the more we are able to incorporate private sector financing into infrastructure building, the better. So I think it's a welcome development. What is important is to build the proper kind of framework that will also inspire the confidence of the private sector to be able to put their money in the infrastructure as proposed.
There's no timeline yet for the completion of the project. Experts say that will depend on how quickly funds are deployed. Besides, the modalities for the funding partnership between the government and the private sector has still not been spelled out. So the present government might be long gone before the rail line is completed and becomes operational. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, the Chinese capital is pushing technology to higher levels with the launch of Apollo Go. It is a self-driving taxi service operated by search engine Baidu. It is on a test run in designated areas, and CGTN's Wang Xiwan tells us more.
Apollo Go stands out among the usual taxi cabs with sensors set on the roof and around the vehicle. It's among a group of autopilot cars being tested on designated roads in Beijing. The dashboard screen features a variety of information for the passenger, and a safety assistant takes the driver's seat to make sure everything goes well. After passing more than 60 safety tests, the self-driving Apollo Go service was launched on China's roads in September. Starting October 11th, Beijing commuters have been able to access the service or request the ride for free through the app.
Although 40 operating vehicles have been put into operation in Haidian district in Yichuan development area, we can see at the backstage that the number of orders can reach 300 or 400. We also hope that the public can reasonably make arrangements for their test rides to ensure their experience.
The driverless cars will be designated to ply routes around 700 kilometers. If you are aged 18 to 60, you can book a ride for free. Here's one passenger's experience and his suggestion for improvement.
The drive was very smooth, but I also felt that there might be some inconvenience in the process. For example, after I sat in the back seat, I could not choose the drive route, and the car could only drive according to the route set by itself. Therefore, I hope these functions can be optimized in the future.
The company's fully automated driving technology was highlighted in Baidu World 2020 in September, presenting how the AI system operated the vehicle without any assistance. Robin Lee, chairman of Baidu, was confident that traffic congestion in the cities will be resolved in the next 10 years as AI transforms the transport industry. Wang Sun, CGTN.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, the world is making World Food Day this Friday. We'll be looking at some initiatives across the African continent as, of course, countries seek to make themselves food secure. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. And we are not done just yet. More stories coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. Scientists bring back to life a southern African subspecies of the zebra that disappeared over 100 years ago.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Known as the Quagga, the southern African subspecies of the zebra are again roaming the natural landscape of the Western Cape. The animals went extinct in 1883, but thanks to a group of South African scientists, the Quagga has been brought back to life. Richard Nta tells us more.
It all started in a museum when the late Dr. Reinald Rao became intrigued.
He collected tissue samples from the foal in the South African Museum. He collected tissues from specimens in museums in Europe and elsewhere in the world, and sent them to the University of California in Berkeley for a DNA analysis. And in fact, it was the first extinct animal to have its DNA analyzed in 1984. Rao's hypothesis was that the quagga was not a separate species, but that it was a subspecies of the common plain zebra.
The Quagga project was launched in 1987 to rebreed the zebra-like animal. Unlike the zebra's pure white and black stripes, the Quagga has a reddish-brown upper body. Dr. Rao looked for plain zebras with fewer stripes and brownish undertones to rebreed them with one another.
The initial project was held on a farm called Fruilicate near Robertson, a conservation farm. And there they allowed the animals with reduced stripes to interbreed with one another. And he predicted that it would take 25 years or 5 zebra generations for them to produce a Quagga-like animal. In fact, it happened in 3 generations.
There are now 12 animals in the Elandsberg Reserve, where the Quagga project started over 30 years ago. The project is currently in its 5th generation. New births take time as reproductive maturity is reached only at 2 to 3 years in mares and 4 to 5 years in stallions.
It was our starter population, and it's grown over the years. It takes a very long time, the breeding, so only about every 5 years we move 1 generation forward.
A small herd is set apart with a stallion that has dominant genes of the Quagga, fast-tracking the breeding process.
So there's a number of things we look at when we want a Quagga. Number one is it must have less stripes, especially no stripes on the rump. Stripes in the middle are broken up, more stripes onto the shoulders, and then thick stripes on the neck. And then this brown coat covering the whole animal.
The Quagga project remains an experiment and a breeding program, but the animals are starting to own their space. Tourists are now traveling to the reserve to get a peek of the once extinct Quagga and better understand the work of science. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't go away. Here's a look at what's ahead.